Hey guys, you're listening to the most captivating podcast in iTunes. That's right, the Elite Man Podcast, where we turn average men into elite men every day. We interview the very best experts from the lifestyle, health, fitness, social, and even entrepreneurial worlds. And with their help, we give you some of the best advice on the planet. Subscribe now if you haven't already and enjoy the show. And oh yeah, if you really enjoy it, leave us a review. On today's episode number 207, entitled, How to Protect Yourself from EMFs, Everything You Need to Know About This Real 21st Century Problem, I chat with Daniel T. DeBaun. Daniel T. DeBaun is an internationally recognized expert in EMF radiation and the best-selling author of Radiation Nation. In today's episode, Daniel talks about the many potential dangers of EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and their growing threat to all of us. He covers the science behind what they are, how they work, and how they can seriously damage all of the cells in our body, including major organs like the brain, heart, and liver. Daniel talks about the research done linking EMFs to cancer and also things like headaches, nausea, pains, and much more. If you're wondering how to keep yourself safe against EMFs, despite their rapidly growing presence in our society, check this episode out now. You are going to love it. If you have not checked out our YouTube videos, go to elitemanmagazine.com/YouTube right now. Our YouTube channel just launched a couple weeks back, and already the feedback has been phenomenal. Equal parts entertaining and informative, our YouTube videos will make you laugh, cry, smile, think, question, and celebrate the fantastic knowledge being bestowed to all. Every week, we cover all your favorite Elite Man topics and break down everything you need to know to be the best man you can be. Go to elitemanmagazine.com/YouTube right now or click the link in the show notes to start viewing our videos. Make sure you like and leave a comment with your thoughts on each video too. It helps us out a ton and helps spread the message and grow our channel. Also, subscribe to our channel right now if you haven't yet. I promise you're going to love these videos and the ones we'll be releasing in the upcoming future. Subscribe to our channel and watch now at elitemanmagazine.com/YouTube or click the link in the show notes. All right, guys, we're live. It's Justin Stenstrom from EliteManMagazine.com, and my guest today is Daniel DeBaun from the book Radiation Nation, the author of the book Radiation Nation. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Well, Justin, thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I just told you a minute ago before we started recording, I actually went through your book over the last week or two and read the whole thing. I mean, it's pretty easy read. It's, very interesting. That's the best part of it. A lot of these self-help books, it's like, trying to scratch your nails on chalkboard. It's pretty tough. But this is actually really interesting. It's an easy read. It's also written pretty good. I like the style of the writing, and I just went right through it. I'm actually a pretty slow reader, but I read this book in like 4 or 5 days. So
wow.
Yeah. Pretty good, man. I was already interested in EMFs before reading the book, but now I'm like even more interested in it, and just really excited to get you on.
Well, I appreciate that. Justin, the reason why I wrote it and with my son was because there seemed to be so much information in the scientific community, and somehow no one knew about it. And so I broke off from the things we do. So I made sure that I could write something that was technical in nature, but our reading audience was moms and dads, young mothers who had kids, people who needed to understand this kind of subject matter. So I needed to describe what it was, and then I need to tell them what we know about it, and then what things you can do, because it's not complicated, but why didn't any of us know about it? So that's what prompted me to write the book.
Yeah, so what is your background, just so listeners have a better understanding of where you're coming from? How did you get started in learning about this? I know you have a bit of a tech background, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened. I worked for Bell Laboratories quite a number of years ago. I was in their product development area, and that eventually led to me writing industry standards for telecom products, and then writing reports about compliance to those standards. So no one really could buy a product in the Bell system without basically reviewing my reports on the performance of their product. So I had a lot of extensive laboratory technical knowledge of the telecom space for years and years and years. What's interesting, Justin, is that I sort of course, I went into the management team and led these groups that did this for years. But about 5 or 6 years ago, the way I deep dived into this space was my boys, my sons. They're not boys. They're in their early 40s, and they had laptops on their lap. And my wife says, "I want grandchildren." And I looked over to her and said, "Nah, the power levels are too low. I know exactly what the potential could be in terms of dangers, but I certainly didn't believe that would be dangerous to be near." So I did some research on the scientific side of this industry, the medical side. I was shocked to find there was actually a lot of stuff. Like, for example, if you use a laptop for 3 to 4 hours at a clip and you have it in your lap, there's roughly a probability of 25% of your male sperm is immobile. So you're less fertile when you have a cell phone or a tablet or a laptop around your lap. And I didn't know that. And so I built them products to protect them, and the rest is history. I got very deeply involved with this, and then we wrote the book. And so I had a lot of background in this space from the actually telecommunications space that I talk about in the book.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And there's so many different things in the book that really stick out to me and that really just piqued my curiosity and interest. Real quickly, though, just on the laptop thing, because that's a big thing that I use probably for the majority of my working day is just the laptop right on my lap.
Right.
What is it about the laptop that actually gives off the EMFs? Is it the heat coming from the laptop, or is it just the Wi-Fi or whatever that's hooked up to it?
Well, actually, when you said heat, when you have that high temperature heat near your skin, you can get toasted skin syndrome. That's where it darkens the skin, and typically it's only temporary, but it can be more permanent. So those are the thermal impact from the heat being created by the device as a byproduct. Actually, that's not what I talk about in Radiation Nation. I actually talk about the electronics emitting technology stuff as a byproduct, for example, of the power usage of a laptop. There's extremely low frequency stuff, extremely low frequency emissions that comes out of the laptop at 300 hertz and below. And so there's those emissions that can be potentially dangerous to the user. And then there's the radio frequency stuff, the stuff you mentioned, the Wi-Fi, the connection from your laptop to the cell phone. But believe it or not, the Bluetooth coming from your laptop can also be dangerous because that's also an RF signal. In fact, this may be a good moment to chat a little bit about what is that emission. When you have something on your lap like that, and you have a router you're trying to connect to, there's what's known as an omnidirectional signal that starts in a tiny, tiny little ball, opens up and keeps on filling the room until it hits the router. So that is a signal that is looking to connect. And that's a power level that's low, but it's a constant load. And so when you have these devices on, it's literally radiating you while it's touching your router. And so we don't think about that much, but if you have Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi on, you have two transmitters that are being inundating the room and touching the devices for communication. So these things are being created by these products we have around us. They're not visible. You can't smell them. You can't see them. But believe it or not, some of us can actually feel them. It's called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. We actually like when you smell gas and you get a response and it bothers you, you get headaches. Well, that happens also with these kinds of exposures, believe it or not, and they call it electromagnetic hypersensitivity.
Yeah, is the electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Have you seen that show Better Call Saul? Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about?
Oh, yeah. That's what he was
Is
doing,
that what he
right?
has? Chuck, his
Yeah.
brother? Yeah, he has
He had the aluminum all around him, and,
yeah.
and yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And you
Wow.
know, what's sort of sad. We actually, well, I know people that can't even go out of their house because the exposures like that are just like Better Call Saul. He literally couldn't go out of the house because of his environment. The ambient was so much for him, his body couldn't take it.
Wow.
So, but you're right.
Yeah.
He had the aluminum around his head.
Yeah, and he had to what was it like de-electrify the like put all the keys and all the electronics, cell phone in the mailbox before people came in his house and stuff, and
Right,
all the lights
exactly.
shut off.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was crazy.
yeah,
I thought when
yeah.
I first saw that a few years ago, I think it came out maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, the show, I thought it was all made up, like it was in his head and it
Oh,
was crazy. But then I read your book and hear some other stuff, and you're telling me now too that it's actually real.
oh, yeah, it's real, and it can be potentially dangerous. It's when you feel it. But 20% or more of the population in general actually feels the emissions in their environment. Of that, 80% of women. So your wife, your mother, your grandmother, they're all feeling it more likely than a man will, and it's a modern phenomenon that's occurring because if you think about it, Justin, 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, none of us owned telephones. And if you did, you had nobody to call, so you very, very rarely used it unless you were in real estate. And today, everyone has it. 95% of the world has cell phones. So all of a sudden, we're being inundated with all this stuff that literally 15 years ago didn't exist. And that's really why it's sort of important to get a sense about what this stuff is, because it hasn't existed in the past. Science doesn't know the full extent of what happens from these exposures, but early indications are it can be pretty serious.
Yeah, just quickly on the fact that you just mentioned about feeling it, and then women being about 80% of that 20% that feel it. What is it? What does feeling it actually look like? What are some of those sensations that people have?
Headaches. They could have their hands tingle when they have a cell phone in their hand. Their their um, their head burns when they put a cell phone to the head. They get nauseous. They get tired, fatigued. There's brain fog. There's many, many, many kinds of things that could be symptoms of a electromagnetic radiation exposure. So yeah, people really don't, and it's very real.
Wow. And why do you think that it is that like 20%, only 20%, which is still actually a lot higher number than I would have guessed, but why do you think only 20% feel it, and why do you think 80% of those people are women?
Well, so we're trying to figure those things out as we speak. But generally speaking, there are certain aspects of the body that you sort of have to be healthy about. Um, Here's an example. If you ate broccoli 100 years ago, there'd be roughly 110 milligrams of iron in the broccoli that you ate. Today, you're lucky to have 10 milligrams. So if you look at the body composition from the food we eat that used to have all the balance of minerals, and we don't have them now, there could be potentially an imbalance in the minerals in your body. So with that imbalance, you're slightly more susceptible to others than others are. Your stomach, the gut, as you may know, Justin, is where your defenses, where your immune system sort of originates from. And so if your immune system is degraded because your stomach gut is not as healthy as it should be, you're maybe more susceptible than others. And so there's really weaknesses in our body, modern day, that exists that actually makes some of us more susceptible than others. And by the way, electromagnetic radiation, Dr. Ali Johansen, about a year or two ago, he actually talks about how these radiating signals actually suppress immune system. So if you're already sensitive, you're even more so sensitive under exposures. So
yeah. So let's talk for a second too about what, because we kind of alluded to it already. You definitely did, about what's actually going on like in the air when these things travel through. There's different types of EMFs. There's different levels of them. Like which one's more powerful, which one isn't. Obviously nowadays, I think our biggest threats from a day-to-day perspective is the laptops, the smartphones that we have that we carry everywhere with, and then obviously like TVs, I think would probably be like the big three, right?
Yeah, well, actually, when you get a Roku or you get an Apple for your TV and you use a wireless connection, there's an RF signal, a Wi-Fi signal that's connecting that. If you have you're connecting with a cell phone to the car, so you can hear through your audio system, people calling and stuff. That's a Bluetooth connection and a Wi-Fi connection at the same time. And so, Justin, let's go back a tiny bit, because I'm going to tell you interesting stuff that maybe many of us don't know. Mm-hmm. When we talk about a radio frequency signal, and this is what you were alluding to, by the way, everything is around 2 gigahertz. 2 gigahertz is a speed of the wave that in the air connecting one thing to the other. 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. A gigahertz is 1 billion cycles per second. So your cell phone is emitting roughly 2 billion cycles per second when you communicate. And so how does that look amongst other things? One thing we haven't spoke about is microwave. A microwave oven is at 2.3 gigahertz. 2.3 gigahertz is used to cook food. How does it do that? Well, the way it works is you radiate an emission, an electromagnetic radiation emission at 2.3 gigahertz. The water in between the cells starts heating up, and it oscillates the cells. And then after a minute or so, 5 minutes, whatever long it's in there, you take your meat out and it's cooked. So a microwave at 2.3 gigahertz cooks your food. In other words, it's a thermal transmission. A RF signal, a cell phone radiation signal, is also a microwave signal, as it is. Microwave and RF coexist. And so when you use a cell phone and someone complains, I feel heat on my face when I use it, that's because it's a thermal transmitting signal. The standards allows it to increase by 2 degrees, believe it or not.
Wow.
So
it's like cooking your head.
Yeah, it's like cooking your head. Right, exactly.
Wow. That's insane. So that actually reminds me too of the guy I saw on YouTube. I don't know if he's pretty famous or not, but it was a massive YouTube video where he had like a brain tumor on one side of his face from using a cell phone for like years. And then he was in some government commission, like talking in front of like Congress or something. And he was talking about how he recovered from it and stuff and the dangers of EMFs. And then like 2 years later or something, he was dead because he got the tumor back again. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I do. There are so many anecdotal things like that where, frontal lobe cancer has increased 2% per year, compounding every year for the last 10 years. The part of the brain that's most impacted when you use a cell phone is the frontal lobe. So coincidental? I don't think so. And so there's those kind of data tracking we know and the trending that's occurring directly correlated to the use of the more and more use of cell phones. But actually beyond that, the research, which is what I sort of try to play in, we know the NTP, natural toxicology program, which is a federal government program. They spent $25 million and they set up an epidemiology study and statistically significant epidemiology. In other words, the populations were large enough to draw conclusions from. And what they found, much to their chagrin after this 2-year study period, that they had an increase, a statistically significant elevation of frontal lobe cancers of the subjects in the frontal lobe. And what's also true is they had an increase, a statistically significant increase in heart cancer. By the way, Justin, when I say statistically significant in science, that actually is meaningful. It says,
yeah,
it means is we don't have much doubt. Our data was clear. Our populations were large enough, and we can generalize it and say this happened. It's an elevation. What's also true is in Europe, actually in the past year, the Ramazani Institute, which is a collection of research scientists from the European sector, they ran a similar epidemiology study, and interestingly enough, found the same difference. So it is still a controversial subject when you talk about the impact of a cell phone to your head. But you know what? When with this kind of data being as clear as it is, being statistically significant, you may want to consider being cautious when you use these devices around your body.
Yeah. So how dangerous do you think that EMFs really are in general, like based on your research and all the things that you've learned writing the book and, just studying this subject? Is it really as bad as, say, like smoking or some of the other things they compare it to? Is it like the new smoking?
Justin, when I was 12 years old, which was many, many years ago, I used to smoke cigarettes. Hmm. And the reason why was because I wanted to be a big guy, and I want to look bigger than my friends and stuff. So I smoked those cigarettes. Of course, I quit smoking quite a number of years ago. But at that time, in the early 60s, science knew that there was the direct link of cancer to smoking of the lungs. They knew it. But at that time, it wasn't common knowledge. In courts, they call it common knowledge. We didn't know about it. I was a big man that was killing myself, and I didn't even know it because public domain didn't know the information. It took 35, 40 years before there's now a requirement to state that if you smoke the cigarette, you're going to die or potentially can die. It took that many years. Yet we knew that long ago that it was a problem and that there was direct correlation. So to answer your question, is there parallels? I absolutely believe there is. There's no question that you use these devices around your body, you run a risk. I think it's a low risk, a relatively low. It's not like 20% of it are going to die. It's not like 5% of us are going to die. But something less than that is legitimately true because you do have an increase of frontal lobe cancers, as I mentioned. But you also have tumors in the groin area and cancerous tumors directly correlated to laptop use and breast cancer. Right? Recently, last year or so, in the news, they were talking about laptops in the bra and how there was cancer related to women using laptops, keeping their laptops in their bra. So you got to be thinking about how do you, in smoking, everyone who smoked didn't die. It was 5% or less. But was that significant? Well, if you're in the 5%, it was. And that's really sort of the message. This is a toxin. It's no different than a carcinogenic like arsenic. In fact, the World Health Organization considers the extreme, not only the extreme low frequency, but the electromagnetic radiation, a to be carcinogenic. it's a probable carcinogenic, just like other toxins in the environment. So even the World Health Organization knows that there's potential dangers with this stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, just like you said too, I mean, even if 5% of the people that are smoking are getting cancer, it doesn't mean that smoking is healthy for 95% of people. They're still getting damaged,
exactly.
At some capacity.
Remember the 20% I talked about. In fact, I work with the medical community in various programs, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later. But there's one guy. He's a neurologist, functional neurologist, and he called me up on a weekend, and he said, "My head is splitting. Something has changed in my environment." And so we did this typical things. Are there volatile organic compounds around? Are you cleaning fluids you're using bothering you? What is it? And we talked a little bit about it, and we finally ended up talking about his router. He had just moved into an area where there was a new cable service brought into him. And I said, "Look underneath the router and tell me what you see." And it said 5G, which is the next generation communications for cell companies. And those are very different, much stronger, and lots of stuff about it that people should be aware of. But here's a guy who is so hypersensitive, he actually felt the 5G router, when he was in the room before he even knew what the sources was. So that is happening more and more. And we know that the 20% is growing. Some argue it's 30, some argue it's more. I like to conserve it. I've seen research that talks about it at 20 on an average, and that's what I use.
Yeah, that reminds me too. I don't know if this is even connected to it, but I remember a few years ago, like I used to travel to this town, which is a few towns over from where I live, and I went there a few times, probably over the course of like a couple months. I probably went there like 4 or 5 times, and just for some reason, every time I went in that town, I got like wicked nauseous and got a headache. And I don't know, like I was just kind of, and this was before I even knew about EMS, but I was just like joking about there's something in the air. I'm wondering now if it was like, some kind of EMF thing where there was like, major cell phone towers or something like right in that, town. I don't know what it was, but it was so weird that every time I traveled and went to that, and I haven't been there since, but every time I went to that place, I got like really strangely sick out of nowhere.
Yeah, actually, that could be very real. I'll tell you a little bit of a story to sort of calibrate that for you. When I was in Bell Labs many, many years ago, there was a mainframe that was about 500 feet away from me. And I had this acoustical link to this mainframe, and I would work on my computer. That machine was, at that time, the most powerful you could buy. That had major emissions. Fast forward today, that same strength of that mainframe is literally in my hand with a cell phone, right? And so all of a sudden we have it around us all the time. And what you were referring to is the congestion or the ambient, how much power of electromagnetic radiation is in the environment. And depending on where you go, it can be a lot or it can be a little. Like if you go out to a safe zone in Utah, that back in the woods where there's no transmitters and all that, you won't feel anything and you'll feel different. You can go into a congested multiple metropolitan area and you can feel it. Why? Because every one of those transmitters are hitting you. And the ambient power level in the rooms are like 1 billion times higher than it was 100 years ago. It didn't exist. Electromagnetic radiation didn't exist 150 years ago. The human body didn't deal with that as a toxin at that point. It didn't exist. So the ground has a DC electromagnetic radiation about 12 hertz, but very, 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 very low stuff. That was the only thing that was exposed to human nature. Everything else is man-made, and it's now multiplying within our environment.
Yeah, I remember that picture from the book. I think it was Washington, D.C., where you had like an artist draw up a picture of like what the EMFs would look like if we could see them, and it's like all like smoggy and foggy looking. It's just like crazy, like how much it really is in our cities and stuff.
Yeah, if you could see how many transmitters are around you, you'd be stunned. You don't even think about it. We were talking a little bit about before. Where are the sources of this stuff? Well, you have your Wi-Fi, your cell phone. It can have a Bluetooth, a cell connection, and a Wi-Fi connection. There are three transmitters coming out of your cell phone. Three. All three of them hitting you. And let's say you have a laptop or a tablet. They can have two or three transmitters. You have the Wi-Fi itself that has several transmitters. You have the Roku that's coming off your TV that has transmitters. You now have your refrigerator connected to your Wi-Fi. That's transmitters. And so the more and more transmitters you have, the worse and worse it gets. So the more likely, the more probable you get bothered from it. I actually like to talk about that as bees in the room. One bee won't kill you. You'll live. 1,000 will. And that's what's beginning to happen in our environment. We're going from one bee or no bees to thousands within our small contained room. And we try to sleep as a result of it, which of course we can't do.
Yeah, I got a smart watch a few years back for a Christmas present, and as cool as it was, like I was really into it for like the first few days, and now I'm like thinking like I really don't want to have to be exposed to this all day long. And you're supposed to sleep with it, and it can track your sleep and all this other stuff. It has a lot of really cool features, but it's like, man, it's just adding so much more like EMF to the constant EMF I'm already exposed to. So I actually got rid of it. I gave it to a nephew of mine, but. Man, yeah. Even the cell phones, like when you're sleeping. So I shut my Bluetooth. I never use Bluetooth on my cell phone anyways, but I shut that. I make sure that's always shut off, and then I shut off my Wi-Fi right before bed. But you're saying the cell signal too, the cell transmitter. I mean, is that still causing EMF exposure to me too while I sleep?
There's no question. We'll talk about sleep and what you must do in sleep, because it's screwing around with your melatonin. Your body's natural rhythm, the circadian rhythm of the body, is being mucked around with by these transmitting signals. So you're getting sleepless. You're having problem going to sleep. Well, that's because you got a transmitter right near your head beating you up before you go to sleep at night, right? I had a radio lady I was talking with one time, and I was telling her, take every transmitter out of the room, including push the clock away from you, because even that generates an emission. A byproduct of the AC travel operating actually generates emissions. Even they're low, but there's emissions. And she was being very polite to me. And she said, okay, that's a good idea. Thank you so much for that. About a month later, she called me up and she said, I can't believe it. My husband and I are sleeping. They had all their cell phones next to their beds. And it was truly interfering with the sleep. And so it is really, especially when you sleep, the idea of what you had, Justin, where you turn off the router before you sleep, that is really, really a good idea. You really, if you're not using it and you don't need it, get a timer or turn it on and off. I have a timer on mine. It automatically goes off whether I turn it off or not. It will go off at 10 o'clock. I go to bed early. And so, simple things like that are important management of your surroundings to ensure that you minimize these exposures. I had a yoga teacher who came to me one day with the same armband as you said. Mm-hmm. And she said, look what my new Christmas present was. And I said, what are you, nuts? I'm an expert in this space. What's wrong with you? And I had the same conversation that you had with yourself. Do you really need to have that exposure? Some of these things they poll only very rarely. And those kinds of things are fine. But if they're constantly polling each other with your cell phone or your tablet, you really don't want this stuff around. And let me tell you why. Okay, you used to play football, let's say, right? You got hit and you're concussed. Your blood-brain barrier is down as a result of that concussion. What does that mean? I'm going to explain how an emissions can now touch your brain easier. A cell phone is about 1.6 watts per kilogram. That's the power level. When we were talking about Bluetooth, that's about 0.3 watts per kilogram. And so these are fairly low power levels that are hitting your brain. Research shows if you're concussed and your blood-brain barrier is diminished, 0.1 watts, 15 times less than the standard cell phone, can mutate or damage, DNA damage the cell of the frontal lobe brain cell. Believe it or not.
Wow.
So this is legitimate science by qualified biochemists and running sophisticated laboratory studies that have concluded these kinds of things. Part of the problem is we don't have enough data on replicated results. And so that brings some doubt to some people's thinking. But if I tell you, if you're concussed, I would recommend you be very careful.
Yeah, stay away from all EMFs at that point. When I'm sleeping in, say I shut the router off and I go to bed, should I just keep the cell phone completely out of the room? How powerful is that cell transmitter signal that as far as EMFs go?
Okay, that cell phone is potentially connecting to a cell tower 5 miles away. That's to give you an idea of what that level of power can do. It can go 5 miles. I have a rule of thumb about all telecom stuff around us. When you have something to your body, a laptop, a tablet, cell phone, that is the most dangerous potential to the body. If you're 1 foot away, 80% of the danger is gone, believe it or not, just by being 1 foot away. By 4 foot, 98. The power levels drop off substantially from those devices. So simple management for protection for yourself is by push it away. Being away from you makes you more safe. So now I'll answer the bedroom question. So at a minimum, I would keep it at least 4 foot away. But as a general practice, I suggest you get it out of the room because it's the strength of the signal, the duration of the signal. Let's say you sleep 7 hours. 7 hours, you have a digital pulsing signal hitting your brain. And so why would you do that if you don't have to? That's what's disrupting the melatonin, by the way. It's the digital pulsing signal. And I would keep it out of the room as a general rule.
Okay.
But if you can't, keep it away 4 feet at least.
Global air pollution is worsening at an ever-increasing rate. More than 80% of people living in urban areas that monitor air pollution are exposed to air quality that fails to meet WHO recommendations. And worse news is that indoor air can be up to 5 times worse than outdoor air, according to the EPA, and most of us spend around 90% of our time indoors. Today's predominant air purification technology, the HEPA filter, was invented during World War II, way back in the 1940s. These outdated filters try to trap pollutants, but only work on particles larger than 0.3 microns. Many harmful pollutants are much smaller than that. Even the larger pollutants that HEPA filters manage to trap are not destroyed. They live on the surface of the filter where they can grow and then be re-released back into the air you breathe. Unlike HEPA filters, however, molecule filters destroy indoor air pollutants at a molecular level, completely removing them from the air you breathe. Molecule uses photoelectrochemical oxidation, PICO, nanotechnology to eliminate allergens, mold, bacteria, viruses, and airborne chemicals. This scientific breakthrough enables PICO to destroy pollutants 1,000 times smaller than HEPA filters can capture. Molecule introduces a breakthrough science that is finally capable of destroying air pollutants at a molecular level. In a study of 49 allergy sufferers presented at the American College of Asthma, Allergy, and Immunology, Molecule's technology provided dramatic, statistically significant, and sustained symptom reduction within a week of use. The results have transformed lifelong allergy and asthma sufferers' lives. One customer even said that she was able to breathe through her nose for the first time in 15 years. Molecule's technology has been personally effective and verified by science, but most importantly, it's been tested by real people. Molecule has already helped allergy and asthma sufferers around the country better cope with their conditions and significantly reduce their symptoms. For $75 off your first order, visit molecule.com and at checkout, enter Elite Man. That's molecule.com, MOLEKULE.com, and the coupon code is Elite Man at checkout. What about, here's a question too, what about if some of these devices are off? Like I also have a laptop on the other side, like the corner of my room, that's shut off. What about if the cell phone is shut off? Are they still emitting signals?
Well, what you can do, Justin, is you can turn it off. But if you want, you can put it in airplane mode, right?
Okay.
You can put it in airplane mode, and what that does is actually prevents the cell phone or the tablet or the laptop from transmitting a signal. So by turning it and putting it into airplane mode, you minimize exposure dangers pretty well by turning it on airplane mode.
Okay. So it actually,
so you don't even have to turn it off.
Yeah.
So long as you're diligent in turning it in airplane mode.
It's still letting off some EMFs just because it is
Yes.
an electrical device, but it's very, very minimal at airplane mode. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Remember I talked about the 300 hertz and below? That's the extreme low frequency stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a DC emissions just by the fact that it's on, that's emitting, but it's quite low. The real dangers are with the transmitter that's in that room, which is the RF, and as you point out, just turn that off, and most of the danger is gone.
Okay. You know what's interesting too is a couple of years back, probably 2 years ago, I looked up. Actually, a friend of mine suggested this website that you probably know of it. It tracks like all the cell phone towers in your area.
Yeah.
I forget what's.
Yeah. I don't remember the name.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'll find it for the show notes and add it in. But basically, you just type in like I think your city or your zip code or something, and it has like all the major towers and even like the smaller ones that like businesses have.
Right.
But I have a tower, a Sprint tower, about a mile and mile 0.2 or something away from my house, which is actually pretty close, and it's a pretty big tower. So kind of like your friend who had the 5G set up there, what do you recommend for someone who can't escape that kind of thing, can't shut off just a simple device because it's already in the air?
Yeah, I generally tell people not to panic because of the distance. You know, when you have a neighbor that has a Wi-Fi and you can see it from your devices, that's a pretty weak signal, and there's nothing really you can do about it. Mm-hmm. If you're electric hypersensitive, some people can feel that, and I coached a more extreme approach. It's not you have to prevent the ambient within your environment from PAL levels that are too high. And the way you do that, you remediate walls by creating conductivity paths for the RF. There's a lot of things you can do. But that extreme is extremely rarely needed. Most of the time, it's the stuff that's more close to you that's bothering you that you really got to make sure you take care of.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. Real quick, what would those walls be built at for being less conductive to electricity?
Well, you can have a concrete wall and go right through it. You can have a wood structure; it goes right through it. Wow. Right? Yeah. Because when you use your cell phone at home, you're contained by stuff, yet you're still talking. So that means the RF signal found its transmitter. And so those kind of materials actually don't mitigate those signals much at all. One of the things it brings up, though, you were talking about a proximity to cell tower. We know through research over the last few years that if you're within, I think it's 2,000 feet, maybe less, maybe it's 1,000, you are 3 times more likely to have a cancer, believe it or not.
Yeah, wow.
So we're beginning to know, like this stuff, when you're really, really close, it's not so good. So to answer your question, what you should do, believe it or not, I was in one conference and I told the lady to move. She had these transmitters literally right outside of her bedroom window. Wow. And I said, in that case, honestly, I would suggest you move, because that's a constant load to your body for you, your family. It's, in my opinion, was pretty dangerous.
Yeah. You got to move out west or something,
right?
Kansas or something where there's less.
Right.
It's kind of scary though. It's like, the more technological we become and the more these cities become, you can't escape it. Like no matter where you go, it's just going to be more and more. Like the more we get into the future, they got to come up with something. And you guys too. I know I want to talk about that in a little bit too. But I know you guys have some products. But people like you, companies like you, have to come up with something that is very effective for just like blocking your house out from all the crap around you, and especially if you're in a big city.
Right. And actually, that's where she lived. It was an apartment building, right?
Yeah.
And they had a tower. They literally put right outside her window. You're right, Justin. The technologies are evolving really, really fast, and there seems to be less regard and concern of the health of the individual using the technology. So let me talk a little bit about that, okay? When you talk about a cell phone today, you talk about something which is referred to as 4G. All it is a reference to, this is the fourth generation of technology that telecommunications is offering for cell phone communication. There was 1, 2, 3 before it. One was an analog signal. In other words, the wave was a constant wave, and believe it or not, much less innocuous than the current 2 to 4G. 2 to 4G actually is a digital signal. It turns on and off, on and off. So what we've observed in some of the research that's been done is that as we digitize the transmission, we so create a signal that's more damaging to the cell. So if I take as an example, if I take a 10,000 pound load and I put it on a bar, a steel bar, and I put it into concrete and I keep it there as a constant load, it won't break. But if I lift that bar, 10,000 pound bar up and drop it down, up and down, up and down, it becomes a jackhammer. And guess what? Concrete breaks. Well, that's the analogy of what's happening with the technologies up to 4G. It is hitting us on and off, on and off. That's what's more dangerous to the cell. That's why the cell breaks down in our bodies more so than it did 15 years ago. And so that's up to 4G. You may know, Justin, there's a much more controversy with 5G. And let me explain why. 4G, as we mentioned before, is up to about 2 gigahertz, 2 billion cycles per second. 5G has just been released. That spectrum has just been released by the FCC. 5G goes from 2 gigahertz, 2 billion cycles per second, to as much as 300 gigahertz, or 300 billion cycles per second.
Wow.
And the chairman of the FCC who approved the 5G, it was pretty instrumental in having it approved, said when it was approved, we do not have to test this and understand the impact to the human. We're just going to release it because we have to be the most advanced country in the world. The way we do that is by releasing 5G. There's been virtually no study work on the impact to the body. And something we haven't talked about too much today is the plethora of research that talks about 4G and below and the biological influence to the body, particularly neurological. ADHD, I think much slower than I used to 10 years ago. I don't know if my age or the exposure, I'm not sure. But the 4G we have now come to learn in research and science that these kinds of things are potentially dangerous to the human using it. Now we go to 5G that's not been tested. It's orders of magnitude times orders of magnitude faster than ever before. But what's interestingly different about 5G is it's MIMO, multiple in, multiple out. What does that mean? When we talked about a 4G and below, we talked about the pulsing signal. Remember, that's one pulsing signal. With 5G, there's two pulsing signals. So now the cell's going to be hit by two pulsing signals, and it's going to be directed exactly towards you to receive those signals. So 5G is probably, if we project into the future use of these technologies, is more likely more dangerous to the human than 4G and below. So your listening audience should really know that 5G, although it's being pushed as the next generation technology that's really important to everyone's life, there is a downside potentially to our health.
Yeah. See, I don't even know what, I think my cell phone, it's like an iPhone 6 or something, probably still on the 4G thing. I don't know anything about the fit 5G, but I mean, that just sounds incredibly, like, way more dangerous than the other one. Is it? If you had to guess, I mean, obviously research hasn't come out on this, and this is brand new stuff. But if you had to guess, would you say it's like twice as dangerous, or even more than that, because it has like up to the, would you say 300 gigahertz?
Yeah. Is it twice as more dangerous? Believe it or not, I can't really answer it scientifically, right? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
But if I project based on the characteristics that influence the cell, it's likely to increase, and it could be a little bit or tenfold. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in the middle is the answer, but I can't really tell you what it looks like because science doesn't know. By the way, the chairman of the FCC that approved 5G, his name was Wheeler, Tom Wheeler. Mm-hmm. Tom, 30 years earlier, was the head of the CTIA. That's a consortium group that represented the mobile industry. So here he was as a private citizen representing the cell phone industry, and he then went on to become the chairman of the standards body defining what technologies are deployed in the industry. So I don't know. It's
pretty ridiculous.
It's fox in a hen house.
Yeah, that's like the pharmaceutical companies that get in charge of the health organizations in America and stuff. They start passing out all these laws, and it's crazy. It really is insane.
Right. So the moral of the message here, Justin, is you probably should think that it's more likely true than not you're the only one who ultimately can protect yourself, as opposed to hoping that the federal government or anybody else, for that matter, is looking out for your health. Yeah. Not true.
When you say the 5G thing, is that what like people? So am I using the 5G at all because I'm like a Sprint tower? So, you have to go out and get it.
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit more information because this is like breaking stuff, right? The 4G, everything out there now is 4G or less, mm-hmm. right? iPhone 6s, 7s, Galaxy, whatever you may have, there's no doubt that's all 4G and less. The telecom industry, the wireless telecom industry, over the last year have been field trialing 5G. In other words, they got a couple of routers and they said, let's consolidate with those routers serviced within a building and let's connect to a tower outside the building, and we won't use cable and we'll use 5G conductivity, and we're going to see if it works. And so there's been a lot of trials, particularly out of California, but quite a number of other areas as part of the country, if not the world, by the way. And so they have trialed, and now they're to the point where we think we can make generally available 5G. So pretty soon, you're going to hear advertisements that state that 5G is on its way. You can buy it shortly. You can buy it for your router. You can buy it for other things. So that's actually just emerging. If you were at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show out in Las Vegas this year, a big sort of thing to chat about was 5G. So it's all about, 5G is all about everything talking to everything else. Your refrigerator talking to your cell phone talking to your doctor talking to your nurse. It's interconnection, the Internet of Things, they call it. And this next generation, presumably, is the underlying telecom engine that allows you to do this next generation communication. Like when you download a movie from a server somewhere, it may take you 5 minutes, may take you 6 minutes, 7 minutes. With the Internet of Things, 5G, it will literally take a few seconds. Wow. So the speeds are so much more that there's going to be so many advantages as a user that we don't have today. But here's the downside. When you do active denial is technology that you use for crowd control and fighting war. What that is a gun, a device that focuses energy, and it shoots that energy to you, and you break up as a crowd because you can't stand the exposure. Well, active denial devices are 90 gigahertz. Remember, that's between 2 and 300 gigahertz that I just talked about at 90. What happens at 90 gigahertz, your sweat glands actually become antenna for 90 gigahertz signals. It doesn't happen at 2 gigahertz. It doesn't happen at 300 gigahertz. It happens at 90 gigahertz. And so when you see crowd control being dispersed with these machines, and these people are running and screaming, they're hot, they're burning up, that's because the natural body's antenna is attracting the signal to their bodies. So that's sort of an example of how we know from research that the 5G technology space will react to the body. That's one instance of knowledge. And I think there's many more to be uncovered in time.
Wow. And you said that's only at 90 gigahertz, and this 5G can go up to 300?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That is insane.
By the way, 300 gigahertz is a third of a terahertz, right?
Yeah.
And a terahertz is X-rays.
Is it?
But, yeah. And X-rays are considered ionized signals. In other words, if those things hit your cells too much, they're going to knock the electron out of its orbit, and you're going to die of cancer. That's what X-rays are with long-term exposures. And we're beginning in our technology to approach the higher and higher speeds. Now, by the way, the power levels are different. They're much lower. But sometimes to the body, lower is worse. Your body can't protect your body can't protect itself when the energy levels are really, really, really low. If they're stronger, believe it or not, the body can protect itself. But when it's really low, it sneaks inside the body.
What? How many gigahertz is microwaves?
2.3 gigahertz.
That's it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a microwave. The power levels are more, right? You can buy a 750 watt microwave, 1,000 watt microwave, so it cooks faster. But it's virtually the same signal as a cell phone. The power levels are much less with a cell phone than a microwave oven. But it's a thermal transmitting signal.
So the power does matter in that case. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But by the way, people ask me about that. Is a Bluetooth safer than a cell phone? In other words, a cell phone is 1.6 watts. A Bluetooth is 0.3 watts. Almost orders of magnitude less. The answer in science is no. We don't know of a difference. So you can't say I'm safer with Bluetooth than I am with cell phone. I'm safer with Wi-Fi than I am with a Bluetooth. You can't say that because we don't have enough research that differentiates those signals and the harm to the body.
But in your view, what do you think?
Oh, there's no doubt all of it's dangerous. Remember I told you about the concussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I went nuts because I found actually research that talked about 0.1 gigahertz, excuse me, 0.1 watts doing DNA damage to a cell. That's not much power.
Wow. I wonder how much more damage is really happening to people and they have no idea what's even going on.
Oh, yeah. I work with a bunch of physicians and stuff. And, when you talk about cancers on the up, there are so many factors in our environment. No question, the toxins being introduced, the chemicals in the air. There's so much more of that stuff than 50 years ago. 10 billion times more than 100 years ago. So we know there are environmental changes in our environment, but one of them that some are beginning to believe is the most significant with the most long-term negative impact is this emissions that it's introduced in our bodies. And ADHD, Alzheimer's, we have direct studies that correlate these kinds of diseases to exposures. For example, when kids are using their laptops in school, 0.5 watts exists roughly in the classroom for 7 hours a day. That's known as an ambient power level. And those power levels are radiating the kids that whole time. So is there any wonder by some neurologists that there's neurological impacts where behavioral problems, ADHD, and a myriad of other neurological symptoms, and many of the physician groups that specialize in neurology are talking about this being the new disease triggered by the exposures around us.
Where does that 0.5 come from?
The transmitters. When remember I talked about the bees in a room?
Yeah.
When you have all these transmitters in the room, 50 transmitters, and then you have the the commercial Wi-Fis that are around the classroom, all of that power begins collectively building. And so that environment, that room is now 0.5 watts. If none of those transmitters were in there, it would be less than 0.1 watts, more like 0.001, 1/10 of 1.1 watt. So by introducing all these technologies, we're increasing the power levels in the classroom with kids. What's the long term? No one knows, because no one's been able to do statistically significant study. But we do have individual studies that substantiate the claims that there is dangers and there's linked to these neurological problems we have in the classroom today.
What do you think of them? This is just totally, science fiction right now, but what do you think of them making some kind of invention that like sucks up all the EMFs in a room and like just brings it to like one spot, almost like like a fan or like a humidifier, a dehumidifier in a room, just sucks up all the EMFs. And is that something that you could see being possible in like 20 or 50 years?
Actually, no. I actually, to solve the problem, it's likely not going to be sucking that stuff up. Give you an example. When you have extreme low frequency stuff, the stuff in the walls, the stuff from your clock, the stuff from your hairdryer, that's not attracted to ground. So if it goes into the air, it doesn't look for grounding within the environment. In other words, it doesn't find a path to be grounded to your earth. RF, on the other hand, like radio frequency stuff, it will look for a path to ground, but it diverts some of the level energy, not all the level energy. And so it's unlikely from a physics characteristics that you would be able to suck it up. However, if you had directional light, which is less harmful to the body, where a router could connect to a tablet, and it's in light, the whole room doesn't have that problem. It's now directionally connected. And there are actually, believe it or not, technologies already that are being trialed that bring that kind of approach to the problem. And I'm encouraged with that.
So does that like redirect the EMFs?
No, what you remember we mentioned omnidirectional?
Yeah.
Omnidirectional in every direction.
Yep.
With these lights, it's directional. In other words, they can target a specific space. So it doesn't go into the room. It only goes to that one space. And directional communications is more likely what will emerge over the next 50 years.
Gotcha. So it's not like a grenade going off. It's more like a...
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a precision surgery. Right, exactly. Yeah. They don't use a bomb to blow you up. They use a knife to blow you up. Right.
Cool. So real quickly, too, on the book, I wanted to mention this because this was something that I didn't really look at, couldn't really figure out just by looking at it. But it was it was one of the chapters with the picture on the different types of EMFs that we're exposed to, and there's like a line, basically a diagram of each one, and you have like nuclear on the far end, and then like X-rays next to it, and then
yes.
It's ultraviolet, looks like kind of sunlight, and then visible light, and then microwaves and radio. That so. For this thing, exact, do you know what I'm referring to? What does that actually mean? What are you trying to tell us there?
That's a spectral view of electromagnetic radiation. It goes from zero, which is extremely low frequency stuff we were talking about before, and the other side is gamma rays and X-rays, and all of those things are electromagnetic radiation. And in the middle of all that, as you actually mentioned a moment ago, there's light. Visible light is electromagnetic radiation, believe it or not. And which I say, I'm glad you brought that up. You may be hearing these days about looking at a screen and hurt your eyes. That's becoming more and more of a chronic problem for more and more use of us looking at screens. For a computer screen, the screen on a cell phone or tablets, there is a visible light component, the blue light component, which actually can damage the retina. You can have premature macular degeneration as a result of excess exposures. You can have dry eye. So, like if you, I don't know if you're a gamer or not, but gamers use these filters to filter out the visible light, and it's the blue component of the visible light that's shielded. So it's actually pretty important to shield that out, particularly at night. If you're looking at your tablet or cell phone or anything at a long period of time at night, it's really disrupting the circadian rhythm, as we talked about before. And so it's not just electromagnetic radiation in the form of laptops and tablets, but in the visible connection to the screens we see when using these devices.
Yeah, like the blue light blocking glasses and stuff they have.
Yeah. That's what it's about. Yeah. So really, you should think about it, particularly if you look at this stuff a lot during the night.
What about like daylight? If you walk outside, you're not around any city, you're out Midwest Kansas or something. Are you still getting EMF exposure just from the sun?
Yes, but you know what? Remember we talked about the body being able to tolerate high amounts of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has. The body really doesn't have much of a problem with that at all. And it's been like that since we were born, when we were created. So, no, those kinds of things are okay. However, if you're looking at screens during the day for your job, and that is an extensive period of time, a duration of time that potentially could damage the retina, you really want to think about finding some form of protection for your eyes, because that could be dangerous, even though it's the middle of the day.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? Let's dive through some of these recommendations that you have and some of the products you actually have created, which are really cool for protecting yourself. But first things first, what about the people that sit on a laptop like me all day and do a lot of their work either from home or in the office and they're staring at the screen? Do you recommend they try like blue light blocking glasses or some of those other things, like the screen things you put over your screen?
Yeah, actually, I do. But what I first say is it's the time you use it, the duration, the strength. There are only a few components of that you should really be worried about. If you're using something for 3 minutes and you walk away from a laptop, you don't have to worry about any protection because you're not really being exposed for a very long period of time. However, if you're going to look at a screen for 7 hours a day, you definitely want a blue light shielding that prevents the blue component of that light coming through to your retina. You definitely want a screen that protects if you can find it on the monitor, but you don't need both. If you have the glasses, you're fine. If you have a laptop in your lap, take it off. Put it on a table. That little bit of distance is really going to keep you safe. But if you insist on using it on your lap, you definitely should consider, particularly if it's going to be a long period of time you're using it, that you have shielding that protects you from the emissions that are coming off those devices. That's also true with tablets or cell phones. If you're going to use it just for a couple of minutes a day, you don't worry about anything. When you're not using it, move it 4 foot or more away from you, and you're perfectly fine. If you choose to use it a lot and you want it near your body, you really do want to consider some forms of protection if you can find it. Shielding that is available in the marketplace just is a precautionary measure for your safety.
So is that the same thing true with smartphones in your pocket? Like, what do you recommend for people walking around with this? I mean, I actually don't put it in my pocket as much as I used to, just because I'm more conscious about it. But there's still times where I go a few hours with the phone in my pocket. What do you recommend for people like me or business people who are walking around all day with their phones?
Yeah, I would. Well, I'll give you my experience. I would never put a cell phone anywhere near me. I put it 3-4 foot away. When it rang, I'd pick it up. I'd carry it when I needed to, but never close to my body. And you may know, Justin, there are devices for shielding. I actually have a company that does shielding. And you can eliminate the signals, the omnidirectional signals, so it only goes in one direction, not towards you. So you want to look for things like that.
Cool. So what does that product have? What's the product you have for the smartphone?
We actually have devices that are they're cases. They encapsulate your product, and we have shielding in the front of the panels where you can't get through. The signal can't get through, and you can still talk to the tower. So we have those devices that, for cell phones, for all personal devices around you, and we have a shielding technology we provide that shielding for those technologies we choose to have around us.
Cool. So the signals can still get through, but the EMFs aren't hitting you?
Right. Yeah. Simple,
That's
right?
Cool. Yeah.
Right. It's simple stuff.
That's pretty cool. How did you come up with that, actually? How did you engineer that? I mean, that sounds pretty...
Well, I think we started by how I got into this. I'm not sure I finished the story. My wife said she wanted grandchildren, right? Yeah. So the reason I built the technology, I decided I'd create a product that actually shields it, so it doesn't allow it to go into the soft tissue of the body. And so I created that product, and the reason I did was so I could have grandchildren, right? and so 6 years later, I now have a company, DefenderShield, that is a company that provides shielding for all devices we use around us. And oh, by the way, Justin, I still don't have grandchildren.
Well, hopefully it's not the product that's not that's not the reason for that.
Right, exactly.
No, so that, I mean, that's really cool. What else you got? You got the laptop covers, you have the smartphone covers. What else have you built with the DefenderShield?
Earbuds. We have probably the most high-end earbuds you can buy. We eliminated all the emissions from it by going acoustical. We convert the signals on the path of the wire. We eliminate the wire completely, and it gets tubes. And it's a high fidelity. It's a high-quality product in the marketplace. If you're pregnant, and we haven't talked about it, and I don't know if you intend to get pregnant soon or not, but if you are exposed to RF in the first trimester of your pregnancy, and it's excessive, you're 3 times more likely to have a miscarriage.
Wow.
That was a study that was done last year, right out in San Francisco. And so we have a blanket that you can put over yourself that protects you from all the emissions in the room. And so we have a pregnancy blanket or a regular blanket for that matter. You can use it if you're not pregnant. We have the laptops, the cell phones. We have tablet of all different sizes. So if you have one type of tablet that's small, we have a device that you can put and find protection for in that device, or large. And then, of course, for laptops, Defender Pad, which is what I created for my sons. That's probably one of the best known products we have. So we're constantly developing products designed to protect the people that use devices. And we also do, by the way, and I've hinted about this a little bit too. I've been able to work with neurologists, biochemists, ophthalmologists about ophthalmology with the light, and a variety of other experts in the research field as well as the practicing physician field. And we're working to try to understand sensitivity. You asked me why women, right? I don't know why women. We think it's hormones. There could be other reasons. So actually, we're pushing a group of people with the intent of helping those who are hypersensitive and how they can balance their bodies. And there's a Dr. Court that I've been working with, who has a clinic that specializes in hypersensitivity. He was the one who called me about the 5G. So he has the problem, and he was very motivated as an individual to solve the problem. And so he works on balancing the body with basic stuff. Water, for example. If you don't drink enough water, you're more susceptible. There's a lot of things like that. And so Dr. Quartz has this clinic out in the West Coast, in the northern part of the West Coast, that operates a clinic for these things. And he's correlated with a stress reduction strategist, a Jeanette, and they're actually finding ways of helping those who are hypersensitive. So we're trying to evolve that, and we're hopeful that we can find practical ways to help go beyond what we currently do to help those who are without having to put the aluminum on your head, right? And so because there's things you can do, and so we have a lot of things going on.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I just pulled up your website. It looks like you guys are really crushing it, and you got some really cool products. Have you done any little like research or any studies, or have you figured out like how effective your, like, say I'm looking at the cell phone case one right now, how effective that is at blocking out the EMFs? That's use it. Yeah.
Justin, that's a great question. As when we started off, as you know, I actually ran the technical laboratory for the Bell system. Mm-hmm. And so I was pretty knowledgeable how to make sure what I said would be what it does. But you shouldn't believe me, right? How can you believe someone who tried to sell you something? So I actually went to an FCC lab. There are dozens of them in the country, U.S., and they certify products for compliance for the federal government. And the government won't buy it until it passes through these labs. So I went into a company, independent laboratory, the FCC certified laboratory, and I asked them to test our product for its efficacy. Tell me what it does. And so when I make claims on our website of how our performance is, you're actually looking at the test results from the FCC, an independent laboratory. And I have it on my website. If you want to see how we do, look at the website. So that's how you know that the claims are what the claims being made are what they are based on study outside of an independent laboratory, not my labs.
And so they are. I mean, I haven't been able to pull up the studies, but they are very effective at lowering and reducing that EMF exposure.
Oh yeah, actually, it was interesting, Justin, from an engineering point of view. we had to eliminate the 2 gigahertz stuff, roughly, right? But we also had to eliminate the 60 cycle stuff, the 60 hertz stuff, the extremely low frequency stuff. And those are diametrically opposed shielding problems. Well, but we were able to do that by using a series of multiple layers of materials to provide the ultimate protection.
No, that's awesome, man. Just another minute, and then we'll wrap things up, man. I really appreciate your time. This is such a fascinating interview, man. I could really talk all day about this stuff. Quick thought that just came into my head too about, I'm looking at some of these products that you have, and we were talking earlier about getting the EMFs from your town or your city out. What about something, like a blanket or tarp of some sort that you could actually, if you could figure out how to do it quickly and, make it manageable or retractable or something, maybe something like that actually goes right over your house or right over your condo or whatever you're living, something like that actually covers it out. And if it's effective at blocking EMFs from going on your lap when you're using a laptop, what about something like that to block it out from entering in your house?
Actually, that's very real. We know that there are certain fabrics infused with certain minerals that can actually be conductive for the RF. So rather than the signal from your neighbor going into your house, it stops it on the wall. So there are ways of doing it. But the problem is it's extremely, extremely expensive for those materials. And oftentimes, many of those materials really are not that effective. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, you sort of want to make sure that you buy the right stuff that does an effective job, but you also need to plan that it needs to be really expensive. I actually have some friends of mine who actually did that in their house. Not only were they worried about it, but they were sensitive too. So they had a lower tolerance than the average person to emissions. And that's why they spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to try to mitigate that exposure around them.
Wow, that's awesome. What was the material? Was it like some kind of blanket type material? Or was it
like a 3-foot roll of material that rolls up? You could actually buy some stuff like that, and they infuse it with copper, silver. There are alloys that can be infused into those cloths, become conductive, and actually can dissipate those emissions from the outside. Effectively, you're creating a Faraday cage. Faraday cages are, where nothing can get out, nothing can get in.
Yeah, same thing that I think Chuck did from Better Call Saul.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I should have said.
Yeah,
all his procedures.
But he was kind of psychotic with a lot of stuff. But you don't have to be as crazy as him. But
I knew a lady. She couldn't leave her house. It was that bad. Wow. We remediated her house as much as we could. And by the way, we took every volatile organic compound out of her house. If you're electric hypersensitive, 99.9% of the time, you're multiply chemically sensitive. In other words, when you smell gases in the air, you get headaches, like perfume or the smell of gas fumes. She couldn't go out of the house because of those combination of electronics that are hitting her and the volatile organic compounds surrounding her house where she lived. I felt bad for her because it was serious. So when I saw that show, I said, I know somebody like that.
I wonder if she had any VOCs from like paint inside her house too.
Yeah, exactly. We actually, I sort of coached her on carbon-based air filters, not cheap stuff, but really expensive stuff, because there was gas off that was in her environment. And it was coming from all sorts of spaces. And actually that helped her a lot, believe it or not. It made her acceptable, her environment acceptable to sleep and live. But nice. It can get extreme. And if you have electrical sensitivity, like Dr. Court, it gets worse before it gets better. So if you start feeling it, really, you should try to remediate as much as you can. You want to reduce the number of bees in the room as much as you can, because over time it gets worse. So by remediating it now, it curtails the worsening conditions that may occur with your body. So you really need to be on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. Dan, it's been such an awesome interview, man. Again, I really appreciate your time. What's a last send-off takeaway message you'd like to leave the Elite Man audience, and then a place that our listeners can check out more about your work, and then some of those products that you have as well?
Okay, so if you want, you should be aware of your environment and make sure that you are safe within that environment, and not expect anyone outside your environment to keep protection. So you need to be aware of what's right for you. So that's my first comment. The second comment is you should be as aware of what's going on in legislation and other areas on new technologies that are emerging that may or may not be as effective as they said, and certainly can be more dangerous than what we currently use. So you may want to be a little bit more aware of the things that are happening in the environment. You want to go to DefenderShield.com. DefenderShield.com was a company I began for my sons, literally, and I did not expect to do this as a business. I happen to have a lot of experience in understanding the mechanical side of it, the engineering side of it. And it was my conclusion was, I'm not a victim. I know I can't solve all world problems, but I know I can provide some solutions that can bring protection for some conditions that are, for me, important to do. And so DefenderShield.com is a company that was created literally as a result of me building protection for my own family. And you may want to consider it, particularly because we're using this technology more and more, and we become more susceptible as a result of that use. So DefenderShield.com, and you may want to get our book. It's Radiation Nation, The Fallout of Modern Technology. You can look on our website. We have it on our website. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a book I wrote for moms. I wrote it for grandmas. I wrote it for people who are looking to protect their family in a way that was understandable. I took all technology terms out as much as I could, and I tried to make it so we all understand the environment. I not only define the sources of emissions that we are talking about today with Justin, but I also talk about what science knows today about this. And it's a cross section of cited research work that's been done around the world. And then I also give recommendations on ways that you may be able to bring protection to yourself and your family. Justin and I spoke a lot about those things today. We have more of that kind of detail in the book. So I encourage that so you can make better choices in your life. So that's basically, Justin, I think I've come to an end. I think that the kind of thing that you asked for, and I think I gave it.
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. I know your assistant sent me a coupon code as well. I don't know if you wanted to share that or not, but it was,
you share it.
Yeah. It was Elite 20, I believe, for like 20% off DefenderShield stuff.
Yeah. You buy more than one thing, we give you free shipping as well. Yeah, there's no question. If it were up to me, I'd give stuff away because I really do think it's that important. It is not coincidence people are dying of frontal lobe cancers, and there's something you can do about it. You can't solve world problems, hunger problems, other problems of the world, but you certainly can make choices about this kind of stuff. You got to see it and recognize that a problem and do something about it. That's what we try to offer, ways of you're not a victim.
No, I appreciate it, Dan. You're a good man, and I appreciate all you shared with our listeners today. And guys, make sure you check out his book, Radiation Nation. And also, if you're interested in any of those products, use the coupon code ELITE20 at checkout and get 20% off. I'm going to go through it right now and probably pick myself out a couple of things. So, Dan, man, it's been a pleasure. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Justin. Really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat.
And just one more reminder, guys, before you go, make sure you check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel right now. Go to EliteManMagazine.com/YouTube or click the link in the show notes.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. But before you go, there's one last thing I need you to do. I need you to subscribe to this podcast right now if you haven't already. By subscribing to the podcast, you get every single episode the minute they're released. Get all of our Elite Man podcast interviews with all of our incredible world-class guests from the lifestyle, health, fitness, business, and social worlds absolutely free. Subscribe now, guys, if you haven't already, and enjoy all future episodes. And yes, if you do love the podcast, leave us an awesome review. We really do appreciate it.